there are different types of opiates.
Right.
Do they go to different neural pathways? In other words, you can use one, but if it's not as effective, you can switch over to another one, like you were saying with the high tolerance level.
Yes.
Well, this pill doesn't do what it used to do. I'll switch to this opiate over here because it's going through a different neural pathway.
Not necessarily different neural pathways, but to some extent different neurotransmitters or neurotransmitter receptors.
Oh, okay.
Right. So now, interestingly, though, the entire family of drugs, like that's what we have categorical labels. You see, when we say opiates, the reason we actually, lump sum everything into that type of a category is because they are attacking or affecting or influencing the same groups of neuroreceptors. Right?
GABA
Like
was one you
group.
mentioned before.
Yes. GABA is a neurotransmitter. The receptors would be a GABA receptor or an opiate receptor, which is more or less dopamine. So so you could talk of a neuropathway in terms of the dopaminergic neuropathway. Right?
Okay.
That means the pathway that usually responds to dopamine.
And activates dopamine
And
production.
either activates, there are actually
suppresses.
multiple different, we will get into that later.
I told you it was going to get
Neurobiology,
complicated. Yeah.
It can activate, it can increase the receptivity of the neuroreceptors.
Okay.
The receptors. It can block neuroreceptors. It can decrease what they call the reuptake of neuroreceptors, because you see there is more or less a fluidity going on, kind of a assembly mechanism and disassembly mechanism, because once neurotransmitters have been produced, they have to be somehow either processed or reabsorbed or eliminated, right? So you got to process them, eliminate them, or reabsorb them. So within, and then if you add production to it, right, the different opportunities that substances and neuroreceptor or neurotransmitters can impact the functioning. They can impact the production level, decrease or increase production. They can impact the processing level of these neurotransmitters at the receptor site or beyond the receptor site, or the delivery of these produced materials. They can impact the elimination process of these receptors, or it can impact the reuptake or reabsorption of these. So that's why it is so complex. That's why you also have different types of, let's say, drugs, including an example would be what they call a SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, or SNRI, selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors.
For the audience, reuptake means
reabsorbing the material back into the cell.
So you're using
the original
more of it?
cell.
Is it being heavily used, or are you actually taking away from being used?
It's taking away its effect.
Okay.
Right. So, but also it depends. It's very complex. It really depends what type of a drug we are talking about. For instance, the SSRIs, because they are inhibiting the reuptake of the serotonin, they increase the serotonin.
Because they keep it out in the synaptic cleft.
They take it back into the
Synaptic cleft.
out of the synaptic cleft into the axons, right?
Gotcha.
So it really is very complex. We will get into that later on. But going back to answering to your original question, if different drugs are kind of affecting neuropathways, certainly there are different neuropathways, but usually the same category affects the same neuropathway, like the opiates affect the dopaminergic neuropathway, but each subproduct, for instance, opiate versus morphine versus heroin, they can impact different neuroreceptors at different intensity levels. Right.
The reason I asked is because the actress Winona Ryder, she was caught shoplifting a few years ago.
Right.
And it's kind of an irony, right? You have a very wealthy Hollywood actress who's caught shoplifting.
Yes.
So obviously she's got something else going on there. But what they found in her purse were 8 different types of painkillers.
Right.
So it looked like they weren't all working, or maybe she didn't have access to one, or she was getting from other friends.
Right.
So I don't know. Is that a common thing too? Do they when people
First
get
of all,
into-
when we say different types of painkillers, they're probably referring to the intended use, not to the categories. You see, when we say painkiller, a barbiturate can become a painkiller. A beta blocker can become a painkiller, antihypertensive drug basically. An opiate can become a painkiller, NSAID can become a painkiller. Steroids.
and these all hit different receptor sites.
Different receptor sites, but the reason we call them painkillers is on the intended use, not on the chemical structure. So, for instance, again, remember a barbiturate, even though it can become or can be used as a painkiller, it's not structurally designed to be a painkiller. It is an anxiolytic. It is designed to reduce anxiety, right? So these 8 painkillers could very well be 3 different categories of opiates, anxiolytics, and basically more or less either NSAIDs or even to some at times even antipsychotics that have that effect, like let's say Seroquel. Again, they have this numbing effect, sleep-inducing effect, but they're actually a different category with the side effect of being a painkiller.